By 2016, this was no longer just a Kobe feud. Truck attacks, street clashes, and public panic were turning the split into a national crisis. Police now faced a terrifying dilemma. Could the upcoming G7 summit security hold if this underworld war continued to spread? In 2016, Kumamoto faced a nightmare scenario. Devastating earthquakes were now overlapping with an escalating Yakuza war. While officials battled the twin crises, police and volunteers were forced to guard elementary school routes. Proof the feud was now bleeding into civilian life. This dangerous overlap transformed a regional gang feud into a severe national security crisis, complicating the G7 summit's protection grid. As the Aiz-Shima summit approached, tactical planners were forced to balance international diplomacy with the threat of rampant gang violence. The directive from the top was absolute: suppress the underworld escalation without compromising the summit's security net. Public spaces were no longer safe. They were treated as potential combat zones. A veteran Yakuza noted a chilling difference from the Yamaichi War. This time, the ritual of the Sake Cup, the Sakazuki, carried a far deadlier meaning. In the past, the rebel Ichiwakai simply refused the new boss's cup, meaning no formal bond was ever forged. But the Kobe faction wasn't refusing a new cup. They were returning a cup they had already accepted, an act condemned as the ultimate unforgivable betrayal. Haunted by the Yamaichi War, police commanders desperately planned against another nationwide bloodbath. As the split hardened, black market gun prices skyrocketed from 30,000 to a staggering 700,000 yen. Underworld veterans recalled an explosion in weapon demands, with desperate factions offering massive bounties for a single firearm. Bulletproof vests and tactical gear were ordered in bulk. Both sides were arming for a long, bloody war. Investigators traced deep fractures inside the main Yamaguchi-gumi, where leaks and divided loyalties were rotting the empire from within. In Nagoya, those fractures turned violent. A physical clash at a Kobe office proved that internal paranoia was already feeding the street war. Police Commissioner Kimayoshi Kaneko declared a massive, unforgiving crackdown, unleashing over 100 raids and dozens of arrests. The raids served a dual tactical purpose: aggressively strip intelligence from both camps before the violence could mutate further. The conflict had mutated into a national crisis, growing far too massive for any single prefecture to contain. Inside the syndicates, every police raid fueled crippling paranoia, as bosses suspected traitors were feeding information to the enemy. Authorities officially declared a state of gang conflict, mobilizing a specialized task force to hunt down the violence. The sheer volume of attacks was alarming, but the evolving tactics proved the feud was dangerously adapting from city to city. From the streets of Osaka to the freezing expanse of Hokkaido, the war was now unmistakably nationwide. Once the feud breached the borders of Kobe, quiet residential neighborhoods were transformed into potential collateral damage zones. Political pressure mounted heavily as government officials voiced deep frustration over the escalating threat to civilian safety. It wasn't just the rising body count, it was the terrifying reach of the violence. Emergency summits convened across the capital, laser-focused on protecting innocent bystanders from the crossfire. In Sioux City, another Kobe office was hit, proving the violence could strike anywhere, far beyond the original battle lines. A heavy dump truck reversed violently into the building, a crude but devastating tactic to shatter the rival's fortress. The attackers left a chilling signature behind. An unexploded incendiary device lay waiting near the entrance. In Tokyo's bustling Asakusa district, a violent street brawl dragged police right into the middle of a crowded tourist hub. These were no longer isolated skirmishes. This was a synchronized national war. As the clashes multiplied, suburban neighborhoods were formally reclassified as active danger zones. In Utsunomiya, retaliatory strikes around a Kobe-affiliated office escalated with terrifying frequency. A vicious brawl in the streets of Utsunomiya forced riot police to lock down the area. The blueprint of the war was unmistakable. Office rammings, street clashes, and civilian spillover were repeating in every region. The burden was crushing. Riot police and detectives were being urgently diverted across multiple prefectures to plug the bleeding. The contrast was surreal. Citizens walked busy streets that police were secretly treating as active kill zones. Commanders were forced to draft protection grids, not just for police stations, but for school routes, shopping malls, and transit hubs. The violence pushed into Takasaki, placing yet another Kobe-affiliated office squarely in the crosshairs. This attack confirmed a grim reality. Geography and local lineage no longer mattered in this ruthless war. A massive street clash in Takasaki triggered an immediate tactical response, signaling a dangerous nationwide escalation. When the violence finally reached Asahikawa, police could no longer dismiss it as a localized Kansai problem. Northern prefectures were now bleeding manpower to fight a war that had ignited hundreds of miles to the south. Command centers anxiously monitored the deployment of riot police, terrified the syndicate war was draining the nation's security resources. Legally, the sixth generation was already a designated target. The Kobe faction was not. The new Kobe syndicate ruthlessly exploited this massive loophole in the anti-gang regulations. For months, the heavily armed Kobe faction sat in a legal gray zone, treated by the law as little more than a voluntary club. Past cases proved that legally designating a splinter group could trap the state in over a year and a half of red tape. To officially brand them a violent syndicate, police had to prove three elements. They needed evidence of coercive funding, criminal records, and a rigid pyramid hierarchy. Identifying and documenting every defector in the new empire was a bureaucratic nightmare with no quick solution. This legal delay carried a fatal cost. In Saga Prefecture, an innocent civilian was gunned down before the state's net could finally close.